Aside from having schizoaffective disorder, which tends to be what I talk about the most, I am also an addict. I have been sober since October 5th, 2019. As of today, that's about somewhere over 3 years. I don't know. I'm not really good at keeping track, but regardless, I have been sober for a few years, and it is something that makes up a lot of my life today. I do spend a great deal of time working on my sobriety. I, for instance, belong to a few different programs and I attend meetings for them daily, and I do work out of a book with another woman. I have adopted a lot of lifestyle changes that come with becoming sober, just to better my life all around. And my drug of choice is not like hardcore. It's not something people typically think of when they think of an addict. My drug of choice is marijuana. There is its own stigma. There's a really like opposite stigma of hard drugs like heroin and meth. And that stigma is like along the lines of, well, that's not a real addiction. That's not serious. What could that have possibly done to your life? And other addicts that I've met who I've told that to have treated me like utter crap because they don't think it's a serious addiction. But like I said at the beginning, I also have schizoaffective disorder, and it is a psychotic disorder, and marijuana is a hallucinogenic drug, and hallucinogens tend to exacerbate psychotic disorders. So my addiction led me to homelessness, hospitalizations, abusive relationships, psychotic breaks, one lasting over a year, others lasting 6 to 9 or so months, rehabilitation from that, which included relearning how to talk and read, things like that. So it wasn't the typical story of a marijuana addict, of someone who, say, is lazy or just a sloth or, slovenly. For me, it very much did completely derail my life. So I first experienced psychosis not long after I started smoking marijuana, but my psychotic episode was kind of dismissed by everyone around me and not like taken seriously. So I didn't have anyone in my life telling me about the correlation. And it wasn't until like my second episode that anyone stepped in and helped me and realized what was going on. And I was told that if you smoke marijuana, this is what happens. Like, you will go psychotic. Inevitably, it happens. But being that I'm an addict, I didn't accept that. Like, I refused to stop my addiction for the sake of my mental health. Like, I would rather die than go psychotic again. It's just a matter of fact. Like, if I were to ever go into that state again, as bad as it was, I would prefer to be like put out of my misery, because there are some things worse than death. And you'd think, knowing that, I would have done anything I could to avoid it, but I kept smoking weed and subsequently putting myself in episodes. I had bouts of sobriety, and they were short-lived, usually maybe a year at the most. And what would inevitably happen is I would relapse and go psychotic. I couldn't concede to myself that I was an addict. I couldn't concede to myself that my drug use would put me in psychosis. I was in full denial, and it was many, many years before I finally had enough. It got to the point where I told myself, okay, so smoking marijuana will make me psychotic, but what if I only smoked a little? Like, what if I didn't even smoke every day? What if I just smoked like a couple puffs off a joint every couple of times a week? I thought I'd be safe, and ultimately I did start going back into psychosis. And it was scary enough because the episode before that was the one in which I had ended up homeless and in an abusive relationship. And I knew that, like, when I'm in that state, I am vulnerable. I cannot take care of myself. I'm left up to everyone else's care. And if the people around me aren't solid people, then I'm fucked. That was one concern. And also, I knew what was coming, and I could see it coming. I had never really been aware enough before to realize I was going psychotic. But after so many episodes, I started to like tell the warning signs, and I was like, okay, I know what's happening. I'm hearing things. That's not good. I'm having delusions. This needs to stop. And I got sober. So that was the last time I got sober. That was a bit over 3 years ago. And ultimately, that bottom, while it may not seem like a very low bottom for a lot of people, it did take a long time to recover from. It wasn't just like detoxing and coming out of it. It was like 2 hospitalizations, and then a third one as a result of the depression coming out of it. It took about a year to come out of that episode, even though it was relatively mild. The medications tend to take a long time to take effect for me, a few months. So that was my bottom, was going psychotic. It's not really talked about. I don't think a lot of people realize that's a dangerous thing that happens with marijuana. For most people who smoke marijuana, it probably doesn't happen, so they don't realize that it can be very dangerous to some people. I just happen to be one of those people. So it's a valid addiction. I think what makes it an addiction isn't because of what kind of drug it is. It's because I couldn't put it down. It's because there were grave consequences that ruined my life, and I still chose it over everything. So it doesn't matter what the substance is. For some people it's gambling, for some people it's sex, for some people it's social media. But if it gets to a point where it destroys your life and you can't give it up without help, like you can't do it by yourself, or if you can, it's incredibly hard, that's an addiction. So I do have a marijuana addiction, and because of my psychological ailments, I just can't use it safely. I just can't. So yeah, it may be a harmless drug, but it ruined my life. I'm glad that I stopped. I haven't had a psychotic episode since I quit. I've also been like medication compliant since I quit. So ultimately, I don't miss it. I'm afraid of it. I never want to do it again. And for now, as they say, I'm taking it one day at a time.